Hi, everybody. I'm Adriana Hopkins with 7 News DC, coming to you from the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. The month of October is Teen-tober here at PGCMLS, and the staff have put together a host of amazing teen programming that is tailored to everything teen, including arts and design, coding, manga and anime, movies, making a difference in the community, and above all else, it's fun. This week, we'll take a peek at some of the many things going on, but for the complete lineup of events, visit pgcmls.info/teens. Teen Action Group, or TAG for short, meetings are back in person. If you're a teenager, it's a great way to make new friends, develop leadership skills, and help the library develop their offerings for teens and a whole lot more. By participating in TAG meetings, teens earn Student Service Learning, or SSL hours. Each TAG group is unique and focuses on different community projects. To find your nearest TAG group, visit pgcmls.info/tag. Speaking of TAG, the unified groups are sponsoring the Pad Drive, a community collection drive that is collecting tampons and other feminine hygiene products. This is a Pad collection drive box, and one of these is found at every PGCMLS branch library. Feel free to organize your own mini community collections with a church or workplace and drop your donations off at a PGCMLS library. Teens, are you looking to show off your cosplay? Well, on October 23rd and 30th, PGCMLS is hosting their first ever Teen-tober cosplay contest. All you have to do is stop by a participating branch anytime between 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. on those Saturdays, and you'll have a chance to get a picture taken and receive a special prize. You've got plenty of time to start working on your cosplay, so we are preparing ourselves to be impressed. Leading up to Teen-tober, PGCMLS held a teen bookmark design competition, and we are happy to announce that Nick Adams of CMIT North High School is the winner. Take a look at this fabulous piece of artwork. You'll be seeing Nick's design on special teen edition bookmarks available at all PGCMLS libraries. Congrats to you, Nick. Thanks for watching, and be sure to follow at PGCMLS Teens on Instagram for more. As always, have a great week. We'll see you back here next week. Take care.
Hello, hello, hello. Greetings. Happy Tuesday evening. We're somehow closer to Friday. I don't know. We're getting there. Well, those of us in library world here in Maryland had to work yesterday, so we're well into the work week. But welcome to our wonderful continued virtual event space. Feels like we've been doing this for 10 years, but we haven't. In fact, it's only been 18 months. We're continuing to have wonderful visitors from all over the place. And just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Nicholas Brown. I'm the Prince George's County Memorial Library System's Chief Operating Officer for Communication and Outreach. That was a lot of words. My pronouns are he, him. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. And on screen is the star of the hour and the day. His name is Zack Smedley. Welcome, Zack. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. For those of you who are groupies of our events, you might recognize Zack from an event that we had towards the end of calendar year 2020, where he joined us to talk about his book, Deposing Nathan. And tonight we are really, really overjoyed by the fact that this has turned out to be the official national launch event on Pub Day for Zack's new book, Tonight We Rule the World. And before we get started with our chat, just want to give you a bit of Zack's formal bio, but we'll preface that by saying he's a Marylander, he's a great friend of our libraries and a champion of reading and books and cool things, and is an all-around awesome person. So we're grateful to him being part of our community. But Zack is from Southern Maryland. His critically acclaimed debut novel, Deposing Nathan, was a Kirkus Best Books of 2019 selection, an ALA Rainbow List selection, a Lambda Literary Award finalist, and winner of the 2019 YA by Book Award. And if you're not someone in the book world or not familiar with all these awards, he's pretty much gotten some of the biggest awards in terms of finalists, credentials, and selection stuff, that some of the biggest honors that you could possibly get in the field of writing. So that's super awesome. And Zack is also an engineer by trade and education, and studied chemical engineering at UMBC, and currently works in the engineering field and spends his free time building furniture, baking, programming, screenwriting, and tinkering with electronic systems. Some of those are skills dramatically lacking in my household, where we're a teacher and a librarian, but we get by. And you know, everyone in this room has a profound love of books and literature, so that's pretty awesome. So as you can tell, I'm very excited to be chatting with you, Zack. Excited for your new book. And for those who have not had a chance to encounter the book yet, can you give us a bit of an overview of the plot and the main characters?
Sure. So it's I often describe it as Laurie Hulse Anderson's Speak, but for boys. And so for those who aren't familiar, it's basically about a high school boy, Owen, recovering from the aftermath of being sexually assaulted by one of his classmates. And so the book starts with word getting out about that, and it follows a couple of different threads. It follows the school's investigation to find out who did it. Owen, who knows who did it, but is trying very relentlessly to keep it contained. And then his dad, who is a large, scary military vet, who is ready to tear down buildings to find the person who did it. And so it's just about all of those colliding and all the resulting implosions. And it follows a couple of different timelines, one before and one after. And it basically follows the chaos that ensues all of that.
Gotcha. One of the things that you talk about right in the beginning of the book in your introductory comments is the way that writing this book differed for you as an author from your first book. Can you talk about that journey and your own evolution as a writer between, well, for one, the moments you were living in were dramatically disparate, but I think it tracked to some of your own growth and evolution as a writer too.
Yeah. I mean, the short version is this sucked. This one just really could not have sucked more. The longer version is, Deposing Nathan, I wrote when I was in undergrad in college. And that was like so fun because I basically just decided to write whatever I felt like, and then we would worry later if it was like publishable or not. And so that I was like, every time I got back from class, I would work on it. I was staying up round the clock. And, that was like fun. This one, it was like, it was my second book, but it was the first one I wrote as a published author. And boy, is that a different experience because now I had like an audience and, I felt a lot of pressure, obviously. And also, I just didn't have another like idea necessarily. And so I told my agent from the get go, I said, Deposing Nathan is like the only book I'm going to publish, at least for right now. I didn't want to be one of those authors that just, cranks out a book every 8 months. And you can tell it was like written under contract kind of hastily. I would put out books when I had like a big thing to say. But then, I we talked about possible ideas and we talked about this one. And much like Deposing Nathan, the reason I wrote it is because I wasn't really seeing that in YA literature, like this particular subject matter, is particular for boys. So from there, I went about writing it, but it was still really tough and stressful. And then, of course, like the plague happened, and that just ratcheted up even more. And I posted a little bit about this last night on Instagram, but I also developed really severe health anxiety during COVID. And I want to clarify, not just about like, do I have COVID? It was like your typical hypochondria where it was like every little thing my body does, I would genuinely wonder if I had to like check myself into an emergency room or something. And I would get pretty intense panic attacks. And the reason I mentioned that is because it would often happen while I was writing, which would stop me from writing. So yeah, I'm painting a pretty hellish picture here, but yeah, it was like it really sucked writing this compared to my first one where it was like rainbows and sunshine. This one was really bleak. But as I say in the author's note, the reason it's coming out now is because I am genuinely like satisfied and happy with it. And I feel that the quality matches my first one. And if I didn't feel that, it wouldn't be coming out. And that's why it took 2.5 years to come out. But here we are. We made it.
Yay! Congratulations.
Yeah.
Huge accomplishment.
Thank you.
Yeah. You led into the next topic that I wanted to hit so beautifully. So thank you for that, even though you don't know yet what topic that is. The notion of this type of story not being in literature is a big deal. Like when I was growing up and reading YA novels as a younger person, I mean, there were not even really stories in the mainstream publication world of women encountering this, and certainly at the YA level. And
Right.
boys, that's a whole other, like, this is probably one of the first books in the YA space that's addressing that even. Why was this the right moment for you to kind of move the genre forward in this way?
Um, Honestly, I mean, I could give some big answer, but the simple answer is, um, I wasn't seeing a book about this, and I always want to be careful saying that because I'm sure, in fact, I know there are books about this. I mean, probably the most notable one is Perks of Being a Wallflower, deals with sexual assault with a male victim. But specifically, like unpacking and examining the issue, especially after people were so receptive to Deposing Nathan, unpacking and examining a specific issue. I just felt like between the necessity of the idea and the fact that I wasn't really seeing it in, mainstream YA lit, and um, those two things combined, it was like I figured I would do my best to thoroughly tackle the subject in a way that was hopefully also entertaining is not the right word. Accessible, that's the right word.
Yeah.
Readable without ruining your day.
Yeah.
And if I did my job right, then it is.
Gotcha. In the first kind of sequence in the book, when you're introducing the characters to the reader, for me at least, it felt tremendously fast paced, and there was like you're creating this moment where like there's this crazy thing happening, or that gets uncovered, and people don't even know what situation they're walking into when they walk into the situation. And one of the things that I noticed in that section and in some other YA novels that are addressing difficult topics like this is the inner feelings of the victim often get squashed in the moments, in the flashpoint moments where things are being uncovered. And we certainly see that in the opening sequence here in the principal's office,
Right.
where the feelings of Owen are just like, they're not even allowed to breathe in the room because it's like all these bigger, more senior people, and then the dad walking in and things like
Right.
that. And I know that gets played out differently, as the story goes along. But did that, the way you structure that, come from any of your specific feelings about the way that younger people's emotions do or do not get recognized in situations, or was that just kind of more tied to the character development?
Oh no, it definitely the former. I mean, I think one of the biggest cornerstones of YA is it examines, how these types of experiences, which involve both adults and, kids, how that it impacts the teenagers differently. And, Deposing Nathan explores this a lot too, where it's like, I'd like to think that most or all of the adults in that book have their own character arc and have their own struggles that they're dealing with, but it specifically looks at the impacts, in a very chaotic and dangerous household of like, okay, what is the kid going through? And how are these decisions on the adult's part affecting the kid? And yeah, no, it's, I mean, the opening scene, for those who don't know, the opening scene is basically Owen getting brought by the police to the principal's office, and his parents are there, and authorities are there, and they've looped in like 6 or 7 different people, and all these decisions are being made about like what we have to do, how we have to proceed, and all that. And don't get me wrong, I did pretty exhaustive research on like what the procedures for that would be, and I talked to school resource officers who would handle that sort of stuff, because I wanted that to be portrayed accurately. But the unfortunate reality of it is, even from moment one of something like this, those types of actions on the adult's part are both necessary, but also can be pretty smothering. And I certainly didn't want the book to take a stance on like, these adults are screwing up by trying to handle the situation, because I don't think they are. But also the situation itself, like I said, even from day one of the aftermath, it's a really tough spot for the victim to be in, regardless of your age, but especially if it's a kid. So yeah, that was extremely deliberate, and that got rewritten quite a few times actually.
With writing a story like this that will probably relate to different readers in different ways, some perhaps very directly in terms of related experiences, or others in terms of the empathy that it provokes. Were you worried about the way that it might be triggering for some readers? And if so, how would you recommend that folks who might be worried about triggers, maybe because something that happened to them or a loved one, approach this type of material?
Yeah, so I had that that was on my mind for both this one and my first one because both are like pretty brutal in their own ways. The first one I would say is more overtly brutal, where there are like, hate crime beatings and physical abuse and all of that. Um and whereas this one is a little more, psychological, um in a lot of places. And so, to answer your question, first of all, I would say I have all of the content and trigger warnings posted on my website. On If you go to the books page on my website, it's at the bottom. Um, and frankly, when I was writing these books, one of my principal sort of policies when I write stories is I never want to sugarcoat things or um, you know sanitize them in any way. And so, because these are really dark subjects, I mean, it really dives into it, like it portrays that stuff. And I would say that's why I posted the trigger warnings. And certainly, if anybody reads the trigger warnings and feels that like this book is not for them, or they just don't have the headspace right now to read it, like, please don't. I won't be I won't be like upset or offended or anything. The whole point of this is, my hope is that it gives a voice to people, and people can relate to it if they've had common experiences. And I say that going just beyond sexual assault, because this book does explore other, kind of dark stuff. And I always say my books are not about characters experiencing trauma, but rather their journey to conquer it. And I don't consider it a spoiler to say that all of my books have happy endings in that regard. Like, it ends with the character completing their journey and conquering the thing they were dealing with. But inherently, the things that my characters deal with are pretty dark and intense. And the books don't shy away from that. So I guess, to answer your question, my main advice would be, if you don't think that you're in a good place to read the book, like, please don't. That might be counterintuitive for me to say, but that's really it. Is when I sat down to write this, it's like, if we're gonna do this, then we're doing this, and that has its benefits, but also, certainly, I understand anybody that doesn't want to read it or doesn't feel they can. That's completely fine.
Gotcha. Well, that's very open of you to kind of be forthcoming with that, because a lot of folks might not be as respectful of the reader's personal circumstances. So that's really, really important. And thank you for having done that. Were there any things that in your research about young, particularly male victims of sexual assault, that kind of shocked you beyond just the horribleness of this happening? And then, like, how did that inform the way that you shaped the story?
Yeah, so I was gonna say, I don't know if shock is the right term. I have pretty thick skin with this stuff. Like, it takes a lot for me to read something and be like, oh my gosh, But I read a lot of awful stuff, and I did a few interviews with people, and I heard some awful stuff, and I wouldn't say any of it was like shocking or surprising, but it was like, disturbing. Um, and it definitely took a toll on me to do, especially during a pandemic. It was like I spent a lot of hours a day sort of immersed in this and trying to emulate it. I think the one thing that struck me, if we want to use that term, is how similar a lot of sound bites were, or text bites, I guess.
Mhm.
Like I read and or listened to probably hundreds of, victims' stories. And so many phrases kept, cropping up identically in a lot of them. And, that was the idea, is to sort of get such a firm grasp on what it's like to be in this headspace that when I sit down to write it, I can sort of live and breathe it instead of just like copy pasting from,
Sure.
one or two folks. So yeah, that was the one thing that in a weird way compelled me, because it was like, okay, so this is like, there's common things here. And if I didn't know about it, there's probably a lot of other people that didn't know about it. Um, and so that made me feel more compelled to like put it in, into the book, and to do so in what was hopefully a moving way.
Mhm. One of the things that was interesting for me in the book is the kind of the range of parental responses and ways that the parents kind of engage with the difficult topics, and also then you see other, like with Lily, your parents
Yeah.
are in a different boat and that kind of thing. What were you going for with kind of showing the range of parental responses? Is this a book that you would hope some parents would read as well, to kind of help them be better parents, or was it just you were just trying to reflect different experiences?
I'd say kind of both. Like both of those statements kind of ring true for me. It's
Mm.
like I'm not trying to be like pedantic with any of this. Like I'm not trying to have like a blackboard where I go through lessons and all of that. Um, like I said, first and foremost, my goal when writing about certain subjects is always to be realistic. Um, Even if that means that like the book winds up coming with a lot of trigger warnings that will preclude some folks from reading it. To me, the realism is one of the greatest signs of respect we can, imbue YA with, and
Mhm.
something that often isn't.
Mhm.
um, and so I wanted to portray, I would say Owen's mom is like a pretty middle road, measured response to this happening to her kid. The dad is certainly the extreme end of things, and to me, a pretty interesting one, because his mode is basically everyone get out of my way, including Owen. I need to go help Owen. And so he flatly tells his kid, he said, I don't care if this isn't what you want me to do. I'm doing it because I know better than you, and you're going to have to deal with that. Um, and it's interesting to me how that I feel like that could feel valid to like this dad character, and maybe even to some readers who are parents. I don't know. Um, but then also, I basically I just wanted to always reflect it through the lens of how it affects Owen. So like I wanted the parents' choices to be realistic, and I wanted to have a range of them. But like I said, first and foremost, I would say the purpose of YA is to just show how these experiences affect like teenagers,
Mhm.
not even because their brains are different or anything like that, but simply because of the nature of like having two parents who are taking action on a thing that happened to you, even if you super don't want them to. Um, I just felt like that viewpoint was important. And my hope is that, um, this is a YA book, but my hope is that people of any age can read it and find
Mhm.
it perfectly compelling and informative and accessible.
Cool. For me, one of the things that was really compelling for my own reading taste was the way that you alternated between the diary entries and then the narrative uh, chunks that are they're a
Mhm.
bit longer and interspersed there. Um, ha- why use that format?
So that it's interesting. So this book got re-outlined 18 times
Oh
and
my goodness!
rewritten cover to cover 4 times. Yeah,
Wow.
again, my first one was so simple because it was like boom, boom, boom. Like I'm writing this, it's good, it's coming out of me, it's awesome. This one was like I wrote most of it, and like originally it was one timeline that
Mhm.
happened in chronological order. So we didn't even get to like the assault until probably page like 200, and then the rest of it was the aftermath of that. And then I like And like story number 3 with the boys in the library was supposed to be taking place across the entire book. Like everything was a mess. Everything was all over the place. And I've never used Scrivener before, but I finally had to use it because I imported everything to it, and that let me have each chapter as like an item, and then I just
Oh,
kept
cool.
rearranging them. Yeah. Um, as for like why I specifically made that first timeline in the form of like diary entries, honestly, they didn't start that way, but that felt more personal, and it felt I wanted to showcase, for those who don't know, this book technically spans 4 years. Um, like we first see Owen when he's like starting on his first day of high school, and then it ends with him leaving for college. And I wanted it to be like the high school book, basically. um, and so as a result, I decided what I wanted to do was show Owen's progression and sort of loss of innocence, not just because of what happens to him, but naturally going, from ninth grade to 12th grade, your writing style and your journal entries are going to look way different
Mhm.
from when you're like 14 versus when you're 18. So the diary the format just felt like a good way to showcase that, and to really show the development of his voice, and also just to show how like heartbreakingly like gritty and cynical he becomes, after this thing happens to him. That contrast between, the first one where it's like I'm starting high school and everything's awesome and I love life, versus, the ones afterwards where it's just, f this and f that and blah blah blah. It's to me that contrast was different, and so that's why I wanted to show them that way.
As someone who journals, especially in times when I need an outlet, more like that progression exists in my own journaling too. Like, and I
Oh
think we all
yeah.
see that in the way that our inner monologue matures, whether it's put down on paper or, you know, um, shared orally with friends and that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I even looked at some of my journals from high school, and I mean the biggest challenge was making the ones from like when he was 14 like not cringy, because I feel like mine were extremely cringy when I was 14. But yeah, it shows in the beginning he signs his name Owen, and then after Lily nicknames him O, that's how he signs them, and then
Mhm.
after the assault takes place he stops signing them all together and
Mhm.
doesn't have his name at all. And so yeah, there's a lot of progression just that you see in those. So
Sure. We have an audience question from
oh, cool.
Daniel. And existential question here. Why did you think that you should be an author? I mean that in like lots of people don't know if they should be authors and go through all that effort or not. What feeling or thought should they use to evaluate whether they should do it?
Okay, that's a good one. So I would say there's like two roads to that answer. The first is if you just mean should you write like in general, like for yourself privately, and the simple answer is just if you want to. And for me, that was the benchmark. I wrote my first book when I was 13. It was right before I graduated eighth grade, and I did it because I wanted to, and because I was like bored in math class and wanted to write stories and stuff. And so I did that. And I genuinely just like loved doing it. I loved books, the same way most people like spending time reading books and reading other worlds. I liked writing them and creating them. Um, and so, I mean, that to me is a pretty open and shut one. It's like if that's what you feel you want to do, then great, do it. As for whether you want to take that to the professional level and become like a published author, for me, the road was basically, ever since I was probably 16, it was like, well, I like writing this stuff. I'd love to see if there's an audience for it. And so I started querying agents when I was 16. That didn't go well. I got a lot of rejections between then and when I left for college. And then I went to college and got some more. Um, and it wasn't until I ultimately wrote Deposing Nathan that I queried it and there was an audience for it. Like, agents were very responsive to it and they liked it. And so, I mean, to answer your question, it's like in terms of going professional, I basically just attempted it. And then when it worked, I was like, cool. And, to be honest, I almost wish I hadn't done it that way, because once I emerged on the other side of it, there are so many things that I didn't know came with the territory. And if I'd known them, I don't know, I would have reevaluated. I certainly don't regret like being an author and writing books. That's why I'm still doing it. But like, I didn't know that your life in like the 6 months prior to publication would be swallowed by promotion and doing, interviews. Not that I don't enjoy this, but to me, when I was a kid, it was as simple as just, I like writing. I'm gonna write the thing, mail it off, and then go back to my life. And
Mhm.
these days, being an author professionally is about so much more than the writing. And so that's why I say there's sort of two tracks. It's
Mhm.
like, if you love writing, then write. That's very simple. If you want to do it professionally, um, I can't speak to whether it's worth the effort, because I don't know how much effort you'll go through, or how talented you are as an author, or whether there's an audience for your stuff. So I can't speak to whether it will work out. Nobody can. um, but I would say you have to love it and know what you're getting into. And I think just about every author will tell you the same thing. None of us have this perfectly mapped out and it happens exactly the way we want. But I am happy with where I'm at and how it worked out. And I consider it having been worth the effort, but also I just say that because it worked out. So that's the best answer I can really give for that.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
So you're someone who continues to maintain the day job on top of
Hmm.
your professional writing pursuits. Are you are you feeling that the kind of the push and pull with that will lead to your having to make a choice at some point later in your writing career, or are you really committed to continuing to maintain both?
I think that it will come to a head at some point. Yeah.
Mhm.
Right now, it's an interesting double life, because I say this without any disrespect to anybody, but everybody who I am involved with my writing job, it treats it like a full-time job, because for everyone else they deal with, or most other people they deal with, it is.
Yeah.
So like, my agent wants to talk to me about, long-term plans and how we, you know, get my income to be sustainable, and maybe other projects I could take on to make a living off of
Yeah.
this. Because that's what she's used to having. That's a conversation she's used to having. But then on the flip side, at my day job as an engineer, um, I'm often having to, like, I shouldn't say often, but I will sometimes have to like take leave to do author events or to write.
Mhm.
And I have to explain to them like, hey, whereas most of you guys get 100% of, an employee's attention, for me, you get 100% while I'm here, but also half of my brain has a second job,
Yeah.
and both are trying to be full time. And I've had both parties in both camps tell me, well, if those other folks bother you, you send them to me. I'm like, no, you're not hearing me. It's I don't need anybody to fix anything. I'm just trying to do both. And luckily, um, again, all parties have been great about it. That's why I've been able to do it for, we're coming up on like 4 years now.
Mhm.
Um, I'm able to do the day job I love. And also, this book was the first one that I wrote entirely while working, because I was out of college by this point. And I don't know how I made it happen, but I did. And so I think we'll have to see. I think at some point, 10, 15 years from now, it will be expected of me in one or both fields to be in a higher position, right?
Mhm.
Like, for my engineering job, by the time I'm 50, I'll probably be expected to be, running something somewhere or in charge of something.
Mhm.
And conversely, as an author, if I'm still in the business at that point, I'll have been in it for 30 years. And, I would love to be a screenwriter. So if we look at stuff like that, it's like, I don't know, we'll have to see where it takes me, but I'm not confident that I can continue walking both paths for the next, couple of decades. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's definitely You know, while you can manage both, and I didn't have the exact same experience, but I'm a musician and have also like come to libraries from doing music. And there came a point where my day job life reached a certain level of responsibility where if I wanted to do that at my standard,
Yeah.
I couldn't maintain going to rehearsals and every weeknight and performing all weekend, like, because I'd just
Right.
be completely kaput. And one gives me health insurance, the other doesn't. So,
Yeah, exactly.
but yeah, best of luck. I know it
Yeah.
can be a struggle sometimes, but there's something really special about being able to kind of pursue all of your passions, or
Yeah.
hopefully multiple passions to the fullest. So super awesome.
Yeah.
What have been some? Let me switch to a different question. In the final version of the book that we are celebrating today, knowing that it went through many revisions, as does every book, were there any moments that ended up kind of pouring out in the writing that you were surprised by? Whether that's
Not
plot, character development, or
uh
structure.
I will answer that with a distinct no,
Okay.
because this process was like the opposite of that, which is why it sucked. I don't know if I mentioned. Uh it's with my first one, that's exactly how it was, where
Mhm.
despite the whole thing being outlined and plotted out, I found myself constantly like surprising myself, often in good ways, with the stuff that was coming out of me, usually in the form of dialogue, usually from the character Cam, because that was really fun. Um, with this one, it was like, if the first one was like a sprint where I kept making really good time, this one was like dragging myself through like broken glass, basically, where I was like, oh my god, like, um, every piece of this. I should also mention this was a rewrite, so it already existed in some form.
Mhm.
And as I've been telling people, rewriting it in a completely different way was kind of like rebuilding a house that already existed, where half of the first half of it was just taking down certain things and then replacing them with certain bits, and then eventually you've replaced all the bricks, right? But the result is you get robbed of moments like what you're describing. You're not allowed to just breathe and freely
Mhm.
create. You're always trying to squeeze stuff in and
Mhm.
then pull other stuff out and reshape this grotesque, horrific thing. I know I'm really selling it. That into something that, by the way, has to imitate the passion that I hope is evident from my first one that
Mhm.
did come out of me. And again, to be clear, I wouldn't be releasing it, or my publisher wouldn't be releasing it, if I didn't feel I had succeeded.
Mhm.
So I do think that like we made it here, but that is one of the many reasons that writing this just was not enjoyable, because it was a rewrite and it was more tangled and I was way more discombobulated in how I put it together. So it became very mechanical and there was very little breathing room for genuine inspiration.
Do you feel that with all of that in mind, there's a significant difference to the reader between reading your work now versus your first book?
I dearly hope not. That was I can't tell you how many times I paced around my house just agonizing over that, because that's the thing is I can imitate the pieces, right? Like I
Mhm.
can keep shifting the plot around and polishing the characters until we've got something that on paper, is of the standard that my first one had. But that last 10%, which is always the most important, comes from that genuine, spark in you. And it's like I
Mhm.
said, I am not one of those authors that is ever going to crank out a book every 6 months and it's the exact same thing I've always done
Mhm.
with just a few nuts and bolts replaced. I want each work to be something new and genuine and passionate, and coming from like I've got some stuff to say here, and you can't fake that, you just
Yeah.
can't. And yet that was what I was tasked with, because I was so caught up in the mechanics and in the pressure of giving the readers the same thing. It was like the perfect anxiety loop. The more you worry about something, the more you screw it up. And because you're caught up in your own head. And I just could not get untangled from that. So that was my biggest challenge. But my hope is that, you know, I managed to get it there. You know, that I managed to have 1,000 little moments, little bursts of creativity and passion that somehow came together and then got all smoothed over in such a way that, other than me spilling all of this now and lifting the curtain up on the wizard, you would think that it came from exactly the same place and guy that Deposing Nathan came from. And it's to the readers to decide whether I genuinely succeeded at that or not.
Well, for my biased opinion, you totally succeeded. So congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One of the questions I have, especially in hearing about the journey of writing this book and the global issues that we've all been kind of living through in our own ways, is, did you feel that any of that anxiety that you were living with was translated into O's character, or did you feel that you were able to completely keep your own kind of lived experience separate from that character?
No, it absolutely bled into it, and it was a specific way. You know, while I was writing it, of course, this book's about a lot of things, but as I mentioned earlier, to me, one of the most important and most heartbreaking journeys is Owen goes from this wide-eyed, naive, joyful kid to just really hardened towards the world and cynical. And I don't want to, give too much away about it, but basically a lot of what happens to him is, trust is broken in a lot of different ways. And, I don't remember the exact passage towards the end, but towards the very end, he's basically realizing that that's what happened to him, and that cynicism is going to be with him forever, and that he's going to assume the worst in people now, and how much he hates that that's a thing now, and that that's such an important thing that was taken. And that's another way it loops back to the dad character, because the dad character also has trauma. He's suffering from PTSD. And so that results in a lot of struggles on his end. And Owen, especially in the early years, is like, I am never going to be like my dad, because my dad is, constantly pissed off, mistrustful, lecturing me on how everyone's awful. And, what to me is really heartbreaking is in the second half of the book, Owen's like, oh my God, my dad's like right about all this. I get why he, despises people and doesn't trust anyone and thinks everyone's going to screw you over, basically. And then by the end, when the two are talking and they both are like, yeah, this world kind of sucks sometimes. And, for me, that is largely the journey that I think a lot of us went on last year. Because every time I turned on the news, I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be a member of this species anymore. And, it's like, that's funny for a minute, but I mean, just every time that I thought people couldn't be more scumbags, they were, and more selfish and more, willing to completely screw over everybody who's not themselves. Sometimes gleefully. It fundamentally changed how I saw other people and how I saw the world I lived in, and I don't think I'll get that back. I used to keep in mind that quote that a lot of people have from Mr. Rogers, where it's like, if you ever see a disaster, look for the helping people. You always find helping people. And me now, I like roll my eyes at that. I'm like, no, look for the looting people. There's going to be a lot of those. Look for the people that are like calling out with the freedom flu because they don't want to get vaccinated. I don't know if you heard, but that's like the newest thing now.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And it's just like, again, so much gleeful ignorance and selfishness, and just taking joy at the misfortune and suffering of others, and not caring because you don't want to, wear a mask or stay inside. And it just, I don't know, maybe I need to lighten up, but it really got to me and really changed how I viewed others. It made me feel much more isolated and much more like I just don't like or trust people as much anymore.
Yeah.
And so that just bled its way into the book. I wouldn't have kept it there if I didn't feel it was also thematically relevant. But to answer your question, yeah, that found its way in there.
Your comments just now made me think a lot about the way that generations, looking back into history, are so often defined by these catastrophic things, whether it's the Depression generation, the greatest generation that has saddled us with all this debt. We appreciate their sacrifice, and then the boomers, and and it feels like from the Gen Xers to whatever comes after us, millennial. I'm a millennial, but
Me too.
The Zers and et cetera on the younger side, like it feels like we've had so many catastrophic things happen in such a short time period on a global level that, like, is this just like the lost set of generations? Like, I don't know. Or is it just us are living this moment and kind of feeling that it's doomsday, but in fact, there's been a lot of awful things. But when you add like the fact that, we're so late on climate change that, the planet's going to die in some capacity, like that's a whole other level of existential beyond like the human species' inability to like coexist without destroying each other. Oh well. Editorializing, I apologize. While we're on that, just want to encourage everyone who's watching to continue with the questions and comments in the chat. We've got a little bit longer to go with Zack. And again, we are celebrating the official publication day of his new book, which is super awesome. Tonight We Rule the World. Couple ways for you to get a copy of the book. One is to order a copy through our indie bookstore partner, Loyalty Bookstores. You can visit them online at loyaltybookstores.com. They also have retail stores in Silver Spring and in Petworth in DC. We also invite you to check out the book from the library, which is a great thing to do. We have several copies of the ebook so far in PGCMLS, and they're all checked out, which is really great. So get on the hold list. If you have a library card with another system, go ahead and check it out there too. And if they haven't bought it yet, you should go tell your neighborhood librarian to buy Zack's book, because that is a great thing to do. And is there anywhere, Zack, where folks can get a hold of a signed copy?
Yes. My local indie is selling signed copies. So if you order it from them, and if in the comments you say, hey, can Zack sign it and or make it out to whomever, then I can do that. And the best way to find that link is to go to my website, which is zacksmedleyauthor.com/world. And that will get you to the info page of the book. That's where the trigger warnings are. And then that's where all the buy links are, including the one for my local indie.
Awesome.
Perfect. Awesome. There we go.
Yeah. And thank you to our friend Kelsey from the South Bowie branch who's tuning in. Said that the past few years have definitely made us all a lot jaded, sadly. Agree, ditto. Somehow, I don't know. I think in as we reflect on a daily basis to try and get through the next day in this period of human existence, it just feels like resiliency is not enough to kind of get beyond just like survival. So interesting times. We have a question here from Chris, and I'm going to flip this question a little bit, and I'm going to give myself permission to, since this is my Chris, the teacher, and I'm going to invite you, Zack, to play honorary librarian for a moment. And cool. I'm going to rephrase this question as, I just read your new book, Tonight We Rule the World, and I loved it. And of course, I'm going to go then, if I'm a new to you person, read Deposing Nathan. Who are some other YA authors that you would then recommend readers visit next after spending time with your books?
3 come to mind. Laurie Hull Sanderson, Bill Koenigsberg, and Adam Silvera. Particularly Adam Silvera's early stuff. He's lately been doing like fantasy and rom-coms, but his first 3 books, particularly More Happy Than Not. I talk about that one all the time. It's my second favorite book ever. And that one is, very dark and very gritty, but also very emotional in a good way and very cathartic and quite in tune with like the tone and gist of my other books. And then anything by Bill Koenigsberg, who's an excellent author, and I actually did a live event with him last week, which I was very honored by. And then Laurie Halse Anderson, her book Speak is the original, I would say the original YA sexual assault book. I hope I'm not getting that wrong, but I don't think there were any earlier ones, and certainly it's the most well-known one. So I'd say definitely that one. I'm also a fan of Laurie's book Twisted, which is lesser known, but so good at capturing the voice of a teenage boy and an inspiration for how I tried to do it. So I would recommend that one as well.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
We have, again, a couple of minutes left. If anyone has some new questions, pop them in there. And I'm going to ask one more question from me. And that is completely off topic, potentially. But what are 3 things that you're doing for self-care that fulfill you right now?
Bold of you to assume I'm doing 3 things.
Okay. One thing.
No. I am. So let me think. First and foremost is I built a gaming emulator during the pandemic. Yeah, so I say emulator. Really, what it was is a like virtual hangout machine, because in the very start of the pandemic, it was like, okay, we need a webcam, not just a webcam, but like a Logitech Brio, like a good one.
Mhm.
We need to set up a Discord server, which my friends and I did. And then we need a machine that can run virtual games. And so I built one, and I still maintain it. And we used something called Dolphin Emulator, which is where you can run old GameCube games from like your computer.
Oh, wow.
And if another person is also running Dolphin, you two can share a code and then play with each other through the internet. So it was a lot of fun building and maintaining that emulator, and my friends and I still use it sometimes, where we'll be on video chat on one screen and then playing GameCube, like Mario Party, with each other on it. Yeah. The second thing is I do a lot of furniture building. The most recent thing I built was a handmade engagement ring for my boyfriend, which was very detail oriented but fun. Anything where I'm just in the shop working with my hands is self-care-ish in nature.
Cool. What was it? What were the materials for the ring?
So it was threaded tungsten that I used for the metal, and then I got this red oak hardwood, and I have a couple videos on Instagram of me like making it, but it was basically I drilled it out and then stuck it on a Dremel, which I used as a makeshift lathe. I put it in a vise, and then it spun around, and I sanded it down like over a couple of weeks. And
that's so cool.
Yeah, he liked it enough to say yes, so that was good. But yeah, I don't think I have a third thing. Gaming nights on my emulator and furniture building. Those are my 2.
Awesome. And sparkling water for book talk.
Oh, yeah, lovely. Yeah. It's funny. Every virtual event I do, I have one of these, so somebody can probably make a compilation. One of my friends likes to make a compilation of me drinking things, and there's a lot of material. So yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, this has been delightful, Zach. It's so good to have you back, and I hope that the next time we see you to celebrate your work, that we can do it in person.
Yeah, definitely.
As long as we've got you here in Maryland, I hope we can do it in your event at some point. But if not, we'll figure out another event for next summer. And again, strongly urge that everyone check out Zach's book. It's really special opportunity for us to learn more about some difficult topics while also having some faith in humanity, I think, right?
I was going to say, I guess I haven't mentioned this, but it is not just like total gloom and doom. Like there are some moments and scenes of like pure joy and fun. And I tried to make it kind of like my first one, where you're laughing a lot, but kind of in a dark way, So yeah, it's definitely not just going to like ruin your whole weekend, hopefully.
So order a copy of the book, buy it for a friend. The best place to buy the book is through an indie bookstore. And as Zach mentioned, you can get a signed copy through his local indie and visit his website, which I'll pop up on screen again here. If you do not need a signed copy, you can get it at your local indie or loyalty bookstores, which is a queer, Black, and woman-owned indie bookstore here in DC and Maryland. Otherwise, check it out from the library. Either way, whether you buy it or you borrow from the library, money goes to Zack, which is a great way to support a wonderful author who has taken time to celebrate their work with us, and also the fact that it's Pub Day, just by chance, is super awesome with strange things going on in the publishing world. And yeah, pre-order your books for the holidays, folks.
Yes.
That's been like the word since August, because who knew there are things like paper shortages and shipping, things like that. So thank you, Zack. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We appreciate all of you. And we have an inordinate number of events all day, every day with Prince George's County Memorial Library System, and loads of events for teens this month in particular. So check out our calendar, pgcmls.info/events. And also great love to the Prince George's County Office of Human Rights, which co-presented this evening's program with us. They're the county's civil rights enforcement and education agency, and a lot of the topics that Zack addresses in the book are topics that they address in their work at Office of Human Rights. So super important stuff. And that's all, I think. Follow Zack on social. Let him know how you respond to the book. Zack's really thoughtful about keeping connected with readers. So we are grateful to you, Zack, and we'll see you again next time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Night, everyone.